What's up, Kingdom of Rock? This is Matt Gibson, and we're here today with Michael Melinda, co-host. How's it going, bro?
It's going good. It's sunny and hot. Gotta love it.
Yep, and today we have special guest Kevin Aparicio from Tulpa FX. How's it going, Kevin?
I'm doing all right today. How are you doing?
Good. You're in a safe space. This is the world of guitar players,
Yeah.
where we can talk about guitar things freely and openly.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's good to have you, man.
Well, it's good to be here.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you should probably. Because you really started this out of nowhere. Okay, I mean, I know you had probably an interest in this, but man, all of a sudden it went from just goofing around with stuff to having a business. So why don't you lead us through that?
Okay. I've always had an interest in building and tinkering. A lot of it came from me not being able to find what I want in the gear that I was getting. So with my guitars was the first one. I really wanted Jazz Masters with 22 frets, and it was always really hard to find one. And when I think it was the professional series came out with the Jazz Master with 22 frets, I was like, I need to have that. But it was what, $1,500? That's too much for me.
Yeah.
So I would say a bunch of solder burns later, and just a bunch of drills and a bunch of bits, I was able to finally construct my first Frankenstein Jazz Master, and I've been doing it ever since. The one behind me is actually a Frankenstein Jazz Master with different electronics and a custom paint job, and naturally relic from meeting the business end of the stage multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved up here, when I moved up to Woodland from the Bay Area, because my wife, she got a really good job offer here in Davis, I had a lot of time on my hands and I had a lot of disposable income. So I started collecting pedals. I've been playing pedals for, I'd say maybe 12, 13 years. I got into pedals right after one of my effects processors, my multi-effects processors, broke down 2 minutes before a show. Mm-hmm. And so I had all of these great reverbs, all these great delays, and I had to play everything just guitar to amp. And it was a very interesting and humbling experience. And I thought to myself, okay, if I'm going to actually want to get all these effects and all these things that I really want, and be able to, if a pedal doesn't work or if something breaks down, just pull it out of the chain, I started buying effects pedals. So I would say for the first maybe 10, 11 years, it was just me acquiring almost any single pedal I can get. It didn't matter how cheap. It didn't matter how expensive either, just as long as I had something that was interesting, something that I really wanted. I had some disposable income when we first moved up here, so I started collecting, I would probably say, more of the vintage stuff, or more of the stuff that was a little more, as they would say, unobtainable. And I would look for things that were more rare. So it was when I started to really get into, actually, what's really interesting is I started getting into tone benders because I was obsessed, and I still am, with Mick Ronson. And I know that he used a Mark I tone bender. He's also used an Axis fuzz. He's used quite a few things that are based off of the tone bender. And I was looking for some really nice Mark I tone benders, and those are really hard to find that are not sub 350. And so I decided maybe I should probably start learning how to do it. And it wasn't until I almost bought a $900 Dallas Arbiter fuzz face from the early 70s. It wasn't until then, when I almost bought that, I said, maybe I should probably just try and do it myself. I managed to build some guitars. I did some modifications for some friends in the Bay Area, so I was somewhat okay with the soldering iron, and so I decided to buy kits. It took me about maybe 5 to 6 months of failing miserably and a lot of things not working before I finally built my first successful boost pedal. And from there, it just kind of took off.
Well, one of the things that I didn't realize until, I mean, I know Joe Gore. He worked with me at Guitar Player Magazine. He started his own pedal company. And it wasn't until I talked to him that I realized there's this whole community out there of people that are sharing circuits, and you can actually download classic circuits and stuff like that. So I've talked to you, so I know that's how you started too. So how does that kind of work? Because I mean, normally if you wanted to, build your Frankenstein Jazzmaster and sell it, you've had Fender coming after you pretty quick. But if you get these pedal circuits, it seems like it's the Wild West out there.
Yes, from what I understand, you can't actually patent a circuit. You can probably patent the schematic as maybe a work of art, but that's probably as close as you're going to get. The actual name itself, if someone actually wants to, and I've talked to you, Mike, about this, stuff like the harmonic percolator, I'm not allowed to list those two words together. That's a trademark of someone who owns it. But the actual circuit itself, if I wanted to, let's say, clone it, or if I wanted to modify it to what I see fit, everything's pretty fair game. The only thing, and without getting into any kind of weird community drama, as long as you're honest and you're open and honest about where your design comes from, because there are very few things that are actually really original anymore, especially in the realm of overdrive, distortion, and fuzzes. As long as you're honest, there's everyone's been very welcoming.
But it's still weird. Well, by the way, Matt, we should take a note about this. If you can't patent circuits, this may be our way for world domination. We should just make our own. We should just steal circuits.
Just clone the world of pedals.
Clone the world of pedals.
Although I think that's kind of being done a little bit, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's true. Yeah, but I think, but it is kind of weird, and it must be a pretty amazing community, Kevin, because if let's say I built a pedal that was popular and I felt, okay, I can get away with charging $400 for this, so I'm going to call it the Mike pedal. You could clone my circuit and say, hey, I've got a $150 Mike pedal, but I'm calling it the Matt pedal. So and that's allowable, right?
That's a better marketing name anyway.
With being in the community for, I'd say maybe that the most a year, and reading up on a lot of circuits, you'd actually be surprised at how loyal a lot of customers are. For example, there's if I'm going to go and name a circuit, there's the Tim and the Timmy, and the person who actually came up with the circuit himself, he sells them very reasonably priced, and now we've got a couple different clones of the circuit where people are outright selling them for 2 to 3 times the actual cost of what the actual person who I would say designed the circuit is actually charging, and it's it's not it's very interesting to see how people in the actual pedal DIY community they won't go anywhere near a lot of those pedals where it's like, well, why don't we just go ahead and wait a couple months, and this person is going to come out with what we consider the original designer of the pedal, and he'll sell a small batch for a really reasonable price, and he's the actual person who came up with it.
But I remember the public. I'm not going to know who the original designer is. I'm just going to go, oh, that pedal sounds cool, and then I just buy the clone.
Yeah, and it's it's really interesting how a lot of that works out. There was a company that was selling basically single component variations of one circuit, and it was one circuit, and they managed to stretch, I think, 7 or 8 pedals out of it for, I'd say, upwards of $150 to $200. When in actuality, the part count inside came out to maybe, like the actual circuit itself, maybe 45, 50 cents. And that's not including enclosure and everything else. And everyone else could pretty much come up with their own variation and sell it for whatever it is. So a lot of it, even though the people in the community might know, a lot of it just still unfortunately comes down to clout, a popularity contest. People will know, people will definitely know, Boss and MXR and DoD and even Digitex. So a lot of times, especially with what I'm doing with Tulpa Effects, I have to be able to say, hey, you guys can get a Boss, let's say a Blues Driver, and that's a great pedal. But I'm offering something that's either a little different or something that's completely different that I think competes with that. So it's all about trying to really find your own little niche, your own little area of the community, and just kind of relish in that.
I was waiting to see if Matt had a question there. I think
question.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Kevin, so when you go to choose what kind of pedal you're going to design, how do you go about choosing like something that you're going to either modify or change or improve or create a variation of something? How do you pick which pedals to feature?
Generally speaking, I like to look for something that I think is a little more original sounding, which is really hard to really explain properly because there's only so many different ways you can clip a signal. But one of the ones that I'm working on right now, because I have all of these weird, outlandish ideas for pedals, but I don't necessarily have like a basic distortion or a basic fuzz or a basic overdrive. The fuzz that I'm looking at right now is based off of a circuit that was, I think, really built for only maybe 10, 20 years. And I actually do have it. It's if I may, it's actually this one right here. It's by Roger Mayer. It was hand built in the UK. I think actually I have the autograph here. I put tape over it just so that way I could preserve it. But I think this one was actually built by Roger Mayer himself. He did a lot of the circuits and a lot of the modifications for Jimi Hendrix, and it was a fuzz that has a very kind of cocked wah sound to it. That's kind of already built into the fuzz itself. And so I'm looking to probably maybe because it does have a pretty bassy cocked wah sound. So maybe if I can get a little bit more treble out of it. It's a pedal that's really hard to find, and a pedal that's really hard to find that's affordable.
So for Roger Mayer, who's obviously a legend in the pedal community, you're not necessarily finding that circuit online. You have to open that up and figure it out yourself, correct?
Yes. For me, it was a matter of actually finding a bunch of schematics, because
okay, so you were able to find schematics on that pedal then.
Yeah, I was able to find schematics on it. It wasn't very easy to read. So I had heard that it was basically a modification of another pedal that he had, and so it was just me kind of not necessarily breadboarding, but me building different variations and seeing if I can come close.
Okay, but if you open a pedal, like I say, if you find something that's really weird and there's no schematics existing anywhere for it, are you at the point now where you could open the pedal up and pretty much figure out how to do it yourself?
If I understand what the actual topology of the pedal is, so if I can discern that it's based off of, let's say, not without getting into too much shop talk, but if I know that I'm looking at a fuzz face, or if I know that I'm looking at a tone bender or an Electra, then from there, yes, I can read values of the capacitors, and especially with a lot of the older pedals. A lot of the transistors and a lot of the op amps there is a lot of there are a lot of resources online that can point you in the direction of either where to find them, or if they're discontinued or obsolete parts, where you can find equivalents that work just as well.
Okay. Also, Steve Walton, who's my cohort and surf monster. Hi, Steve. He wants to know what's your weirdest, most far out pedal idea that's usable for most guitars. Because I guess that's the thing too. I mean, as a creator, you can go as far and out as you want, and I know that you do some pretty experimental playing on your own. So there's probably no pedal that's too weird for you. But do you have to kind of calm yourself down a little bit to come up with weird ideas that are still usable?
What's funny is that I was a noise artist. People would probably say I still am, but I was a noise artist for about 4 or 5 years up here in the Sacramento area, and so I have a nice circle of people who are willing to listen to what these designs are and are willing to actually pay me for them, which is really nice. But if we're going to talk about like most outlandish idea that's still usable, I have one that I'm working on right now, and I'm not sure if Steve knows about the. I know he knows of Radiohead, but the actual song "Go to Sleep," at the end of it, it's kind of a glitching guitar sound that is used through a bunch of different effects and even a computer. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to get a delay pedal to kind of mimic kind of that the delay that a glitch gets, but I wanted glitch on demand. So there is an oscillator. So it's basically just a really choppy tremolo. We're talking about a dirty tremolo that no one would really want to use in general. Like you can actually hear the clocking of the timing device. Like it is that raw and out there. But
dirty. No, I was just gonna say dirty tremolo. That makes, just saying that together makes my skin crawl, dude. I don't even want to hear that. I don't.
Yeah.
You have to be really good to make tremolo work in the first place. A lot, especially fast.
Yeah.
So dirty is in tremolo, no good. I hear you.
And so what if I take an input sensitive delay? There aren't very many out there, but there is one delay that is where the tracking and the depth of the modulation is controlled by light. So how hard or how soft you pick actually affects the modulation a little bit. So what if I'm able to take something that uses light and then instantly chop it? So if I take the signal away, the light quickly dies. So how does the modulation react to that? And so what if I'm able to take that and, let's just say, put that oscillator on a momentary switch? So now I have a very interesting modulated kind of crazy, tape failing delay. But then on top of that, if I step on a foot switch, then all of a sudden I get a really dirty tremolo as fast or as slow as I want, and it kind of it mimics a glitch. So it mimics kind of computer circuitry with kind of like analog technology, where I'm purposefully killing the signal myself, and I can keep it as long or as short as I want. And the added advantage is that when the signal dies from being chopped up, the modulation kind of goes haywire. It doesn't really know what to do. So even then, it kind of sounds like the world's melting a little bit.
And this is usable.
Yeah, it actually is. I'm actually working right now. I'm working with someone in Holland actually who's looking to get who does PCB design, and he does it for a very reasonable price, and it's a small business, and that's how he supports his family. So I really love using him for the design. Before he made a PCB for me of that design, that pedal would take anywhere from 1.5 to 2 weeks to make, because I'm doing all of the connections myself. I just built one the other day in about 4 hours, I think. 4 hours, including troubleshooting and putting the enclosure together and everything. And it's something that I think I would say a more experimental guitarist can use. But the actual delay itself, the the depth of the modulation and the modulation itself is usable via control knobs, so you can actually make it as extreme or as subtle as you want.
Okay. And then there's Desmond. Well, there's the bass player from Surf Monster. He wants to know what your most popular pedal is at the moment.
At the moment, actually, at the moment, it's my Uvash circuit. It's named after a vampiric star. So it's a star god that eats other stars, basically. Mm-hmm. It's a mix of two fuzzes, and it's super loud, and it's there. You can blend the signals together, but they're still in series, so it's not true parallel. It's not a true parallel blend. So when you actually push one circuit with the other, I purposefully had the really loud circuit go first, so you can actually push the second fuzz with incredible amounts of volume. And when you do that, you actually start to get self-oscillation. You start to get noise, and it can actually self-generate its own tones and its own oscillated signals. And when you can go from that extreme, or you can make it sound like a really thick fuzz that you can actually blend in a secondary fuzz along with it. And I think I've sold up. I think and if we're going to go with popularity, I'm up and coming. I've only really been officially Tulpa FX since October 31st of 2020. So given all of that, I've sold, I think, anywhere from 10 to 12 of them.
Okay, awesome.
So given right now, a lot of my R&D is funded by a lot of one-offs. So I tend to look and see what's popular or what's selling, and I tend to do my own version of it, and I usually take the funds from there to go ahead and fund like a bunch of components or experimental things that I use to design other pedals with. Okay.
By the way, Kingdom of Rock, if Matt is diving in and out here, it's just because he is at a mastermind in Las Vegas where maybe the internet connection isn't so great. But you still there, Matt?
Yeah, he gave us the thumbs up.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Because he's actually freezing on my screen. Okay. Well, and also, when you make these things yourself and you sell them, I mean, because I kind of have a funny story, and I know Joe Gore wouldn't mind me sharing because we've had a laugh about it. But when Joe Gore first started making pedals himself, I tried one out at a gig where I was opening up for the late Ronnie Montrose, and the pedal just went out right in the middle of the show. And I had the hilarious scenario where Ronnie Montrose is on his hands and knees crawling behind me trying to fix the pedal while we're playing. But
yeah.
But that's just one of those things. I mean, it doesn't, how do you, what typically makes a pedal do something like that? Like you're building them. I mean, it sounds like kind of a crazy question, but, Boss has been in business so long that they're pretty much, screw up proof almost in a way. For a builder like yourself, you have to be careful about, am I gonna drop it? Am I gonna kick it? Am I gonna throw it into the car? Is it going to drop out of the car onto the street? And you have to try to make it as bulletproof as possible. So how do you do that?
There are a lot of companies that what they do is they bring everything down to the measurement. So if they're going to use just one enclosure and stick with that, then what they do is they basically design their actual circuit board to fit perfectly inside of that that enclosure. So that way, when everything's mounted to, let's say, the actual control knobs, so there's very little wiggle room, and so that's probably the best way in which a lot of people make their pedals indestructible. There's also developments in technology where you can use like what they call feather click switches now. So the actual force needed to engage your pedal is much less than what it used to be with your with your typical boutique pedal. And so now that you're using less force, it has a lot less opportunity to break down and fail. And now there are things that I know that Earthquaker uses. They use things like a relay bypass, where it's basically a soft touch momentary switch that basically sends signals to the actual circuit itself, and you don't even hear a click at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of stuff, especially with like, let's say a company like Boss, they've been at the pedal game forever. So it's like they basically have a lot of that stuff down to a science. Mm-hmm. Whereas with a lot of the DIY community, we're just a bunch of we're just a bunch of wires with solder, and there are some who actually have time to do things like learn PCB design. And we have fuzz pedals that are actually no bigger than let's say, I don't know, if we're gonna look like something that's probably like maybe this tiny, that has the actual knob and has the actual foot switch in it, where it's so tiny because they've managed to engineer that themselves, and so it's a great breadth of knowledge that that I'm actually in right now, which is fantastic.
Okay. Also, Steve's back asking about, why are people cloning a Klon Centaur? Aren't the insides coated in goop? Is that scheme really all that? And that's one of those things that's really, I'm not someone who's going to spend like $1,000 or whatever it costs for, a vintage Klon.
Okay.
There's a couple of issues here. I guess there's ones, to Steve's point, how many people are doing that, and then the secondary question is, with so many awesome fuzzes and distortions and overdrives out there, why would any wacko pay ridiculous amounts of money for that pedal that most people can't even hear the difference between?
I think a lot of it has to do with the process in and of itself. I don't know it to be true, but I heard that there was a whole interview process that went into actually getting a Klon from Bill Finnegan to begin with, mm-hmm. and then he made them all himself. He made them all himself. He never outsourced anything, as far as I know, for the actual Klon circuit. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of mystery behind that. And yeah, he did put goop on his circuit. And what happened was a bunch of engineers got together, and they got a couple of them. I don't know how much they spent, but they basically degooped it at the at their own peril and destroyed a couple circuit boards. But they were able to get the measurements, the values, and they were able to create clones. And it's one of those circuits where, yeah, the knowledge is out there, the knowledge is available to anyone who wants it, but there's still enough lore and enough mythology behind that pedal where a basic legit Klon can pull anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000, and I believe someone listed. Go ahead. Yeah, it's crazy. I think someone listed
right there. Once again, it's kind of a fuzz pedal. Like, if it's even 5% more awesome than any pedal like it in the universe, how many people are going to actually hear that 5%? Because we play for people, so this is almost like an ego thing, yeah, in a way. Where I spent $5,000 or $10,000 for my pedal. I can't even really hear the difference, but I spent $10,000 on that pedal, so I'm awesome. I mean,
No, there was someone, I don't know who it was, but someone purported to have the serial number 1 of the Klon and tried to sell it for $500,000.
Oh my God.
And yeah.
That's just a rich guitar collector that probably can't even play. Like, that's gonna buy that.
Yeah,
I guess you're right, Kevin, where the mythology of this and him making them all his own and all that, but I just think it's just weird to me. And then I'll get off this whole subject, go on to something else. But with a whole bunch of DIY people out there and a whole bunch of corporations that have access to these circuits and are doing excellent work, mm-hmm. It's, again, you're asking me to spend $5,000 to $10,000 to $500,000 for an overdrive, right? I mean, it seems insane to me.
Yeah. I mean, I see it. I see it all the time. I'm guilty of it myself. I have built fuzz ride circuits. I've built harmonic percolators. I've built fuzz faces that are done the old school way. So we're talking about 5-fiber board and turrets, and everything is done old school. I even spent a little bit of money on those really old and crusty capacitors. But the point is that they have the right words on them, and you put it together, and you go ahead and take pictures of it, and someone's willing to buy that, because a lot of times what happens is that you're basically paying for a vibe, and there really isn't too much of a difference sometimes with the way a circuit is built. There are a couple people who do tone benders. They do zonk machines. They do the Shin A companion fuzz. They do a lot of those fuzzes in the old school way, and they've actually told me about currents and everything, and how the position of a pot affects how the position of a pot to your input jack actually affects how this the fuzz and the output is affected. And these are people who have been doing it for such a long time that they have they even have the quote unquote vintage and old school way down to a science itself. And it's like I can build I can build a tone bender any way I want, but it's not going to sound exactly like this guy, because he's got a different thing going on with how he creates it. And so it's crazy how you can get a tone bender from 4 or 5 different builders, and even though they're roughly the same components, they're all going to sound and feel different.
Well, that's kind of, Nathan Pitts just made a comment here. I think some of it is the feel of the pedal. I wouldn't spend that money on it. I'm sure he's talking about the Klon. But for some, it makes them play differently because the sound and feel inspires them. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of a benefit if I was a Fuzzrite collector, that I could get 5 different ones from 5 different, boutique makers and have a whole bunch of different flavors.
Yeah, or even if you want, you can start branching out into the Orpheum fuzz, which was essentially a Fuzzrite with 2 or 3 different components, and you'll get the same feel, but you'll get more bass, or you'll get a little bit more saturation because of what's being introduced into the circuit by the components. And it's really interesting to kind of see just how many different voices there are, and even people who build with PCBs, not to knock on them at all, because it's like, now that I'm doing it myself, it's like, wow, I can't believe I've been doing it the other way for so long. But it still allows you the opportunity to mess with the components and to start creating something that is your own.
Has there been any big challenges to you as you've gotten into this, or has it all just been, the love of, tinkering, and there's been no bummers at all?
I would say the absolute bummer is the fear that I'm sending someone something and it arrives DOA. That is perhaps the only real fear I have. What I do when someone orders a custom from me is we talk about sounds, we talk about the songs they love, we talk about what sounds they're looking for, and if they can send me songs, that's even better. And then I can do the research, find out what the gear is, and find out what they were using and how I can tailor it to what the customer wants. And from there, and of course, it's if the company ever becomes something bigger, I probably won't be able to do it anymore. But I really like the thrill of building and, let's say, doing a sound file or a video file and say, okay, this is what your pedal is. If you like it, this is how much it costs. I'm very fortunate that I haven't had someone go, oh yeah, well, that's not really what I'm looking for, and I have to start all over again. But it's kind of, it's what makes me, it's what kind of sets me apart right now, is that I want to make sure, you're getting the tones that you want before we do any kind of actual money exchange.
Let me ask you this, Kevin. there's a lot of vintage pedals, especially that are, can get pretty pricey, as we were talking about. Are there any pedals out there that you're like, you know what, don't mess with perfection?
Oh yes, the Roger Meyer Voodoo Vibe, and I owned one for I think 6 or 7 years, and I actually just recently sold it so I can buy more parts. And I was actually able to make I think $150 profit on what I initially paid for it.
But that's a pedal, as Matt said, you would. There's no way anybody can improve on that.
No, it is imperfectly chewy and wonderful, and just whenever you plug into it, there's no such thing as a bad sound coming from it, and that's probably one of only two pedals that I can actually say that about. And I have played and owned a lot of pedals, a lot.
we get that impression.
Is there a pedal that you would pay $10,000 for if you had it?
No. I would say the most, and perhaps the most expensive pedal I've ever bought was $320, and I have it right here. It is the RM1N by Industrial Electric. It's essentially a reverb pedal. It has a feedback depth. It has two different reverb outputs, so you can blend between the two. It has a post and pre-gain, so you can actually use this as a standalone fuzz or distortion pedal with no reverb, and it has a momentary oscillation switch built into it. It is a very weird pedal. When you turn it on, there's a really weird click that you hear every now and then. I'm not quite sure. I remember I used to be on a constant, I used to talk to the builder all the time. And I always asked him what it was. And he said there was something about the clocking and the mechanism inside, that caused a lot of the oscillations that just caused that weird click. And he said, that's just, it's basically, it's old, obsolete technology. You're basically also paying, you're paying for what it does, but at the same time, you're also paying for the artifacts that come with it.
Good point.
That's I guess that's one of the beautiful things about what's going on right now is that people are going to surplus stores and they're buying old radios and they're buying electronics and they're basically ripping the guts open and grabbing the components that they can because that's kind of also part of what makes pedal building, especially right now, an art form. Is that you can do things like that. You can say you're recycling old parts from a radio and now you've turned it into something different.
Yeah, that does sound awesome. Yeah, and it's great that you're doing custom work because sometimes those, I had this vision in my mind that this old cast iron Ibanez phaser that I had was the most awesome thing in the world. I forget what the model number was. And I sold it, of course, and I always thought, the memory was that was the most awesome phaser ever. And then I found one in a store at some point. Of course, now it's like $375 or something. But I said, okay, I still got to have it. That's my youth right there. And I bought it, and the sound was it's still pretty good. But what I didn't realize is if I had it in a chain of pedals, it would get that pedal and the volume would go into the toilet. It was just not really usable for today. Fine in the studio, but not something you could take out live. So it's also good, if there's people that know about people like yourself that, if you have that kind of pedal that you wish you could get, but the vintage ones aren't going to do it for you anymore, you could probably recreate them and modernize them to where they work on stage today, correct?
Oh yeah. What is really interesting, and I have total respect for this company because I think they do great stuff. But one of the companies that is very infamous for a volume drop is Electro Harmonics. Mm-hmm. It's like I've when I first started playing, I owned a lot of a lot of that series that they did, like the number one Echo and the stereo clone theory. And I've had the small clone. I've had various versions of the Bad Stone. I've had the soft tech versions. I've had the reissues. I've had, things that were made in the late 80s, early 90s. And I love that effect. But so help me, every time I turn it on, there is a noticeable volume drop.
And as a designer, what's the reason for that? Is that just somebody? I mean, I love electroharmonic stuff too. Grew up with it, but is that just somebody not paying attention to something, or the sound of the pedal is dependent on the volume level going down?
I have yet to really come up with a proper answer as to why this problem hasn't been fixed. When you're talking about vintage pedals, a lot of that is just, I'm going to grab a bunch of components and this is what I can afford to make. And that's just kind of how it works out. But there is a lot out there in terms of recovery gain stages that are really clean, that can actually make up for all the volume lost. And it baffles me that, that some of the pedals are still being put out there that have these really extreme volume drops, and it's not like it's something that's tiny. It's something that's really noticeable.
Yeah, like that phaser was like falling off a cliff.
Yeah, before I sold it, I owned a custom fuzz face that was built to vintage spec. So the person, dug through a bunch of germanium transistors. They got the gains right. They biased it correctly. Like the community will they'll tape a piece of paper inside of the pedal and tell you all the voltage readings. Like that's how that's how intense in terms of detail some people will get. And it sounded fantastic. But so help me if it was, if not at unity, slightly below. And so it's a pedal that just had to either be on all the time or I would only use it in the studio.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, full transparency here, Kevin and I have been working on some pedals for me, like this is named after my dog Rebel Girl, which is a fuzz, and then I forgot, these are prototypes. This is after my dog Agent Danger, and we have one for Iggy Pup as well.
Yes.
And it's been an interesting journey. These aren't out yet, but Kevin and I are developing them, certainly as a company. But it's been interesting to be able to work with Kevin to say, I mean, he pretty much nails it right off the bat, but it's been interesting to go, could it have a little more low end? Or I kind of, because for me, the reason I wanted to do this and work with someone like Kevin is, you get an idea about a fuzz that's just, chewier and just louder and just has so much texture, because I want to go after a Reeves Cabral sound or something like that. And it is interesting when you get with somebody, because it's just kind of like, well, I want more of this. And it's pretty, you're pretty quick to go, okay, I can just tweak that. I mean, and it's not really an exact science because it's analog technology, but it is amazing how close a designer can get if somebody does, send you MP3s or something and say, this is what I want.
Yeah, it's one of the things that drew me to guitar playing were all of the sounds that were available. When I was younger, I was really into David Bowie. I was really into U2, and to me, all of the textures and all the sounds that you would get is something that was really interesting to me. And it wasn't until I started, really getting into pedals that I was actually able to research, well, they used a big muff on this. They used like, let's say, an MXR Distortion Plus here. And, you kind of start to get an idea of what the pedal sounds like. It's not going to be exact because then you're dealing with how a person plays, how the microphone was held up to the amplifier and everything. But you can get pretty close. And it's, and to me, that's kind of like, it's kind of like if you're selling someone a cologne, if you're selling someone, like somebody that's very personal, like, tell me what you like, tell me who you are, and let's go ahead and let's get a sound together.
Yeah, because and it's good you mentioned that too, because I think sometimes people forget when they say, "Oh, I love Mick Ronson's sound on this David Bowie song." It is not just the pedals he used. Well, of course, it's him, so there's that.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's the guitar in whatever shape it was in that day, whatever shape the guitar chord was in, the pedals he was using, yes, but also, as you said, the microphone used, the mic position, what preamp was at the recording studio, how was the engineer hearing it that day, what EQ was used from the board, what compression. I mean, it's not just, hey, I got my pedal, I'm going to sound like them,
Yeah, and and especially with someone like Mick Ronson, who, you could tell it's Mick Ronson when you hear them play, but he's going to sound way different with Tony Visconti, producing him, and let's say The Man Who Sold the World, as opposed to anything that he played where Ken Scott is producing him. So we can, even though he's barely there, you can hear him quite clearly when he comes out in, let's say, Hunky Dory, that album. And and the way they recorded his guitar during Ziggy Stardust is a lot different than what they did for Aladdin Sane. And so and the amp that he used in and of itself had a different EQ to it, which is something that people, there aren't very many people who offer that quote unquote sound in a box, but a couple people do, and it's a certain kind of EQ that gave Ronson his sound on top of his playing in and of itself.
Well, and on that note, since you're an analog designer, what do you think about, digital designers who actually purport to take all those elements that we just mentioned and model them, and then it is kind of the Jeff Beck sound in a box or the Mick Ronson sound in a box or whatever?
The technology has gotten so fantastic that I'm not too sure exactly what the terms is, but I think they're like impulse responses or the Kemper or things like even Axe effects, like the fractal stuff. It sounds fantastic, and the technology has gotten so good that you can actually record direct now, and people really can't tell much of a difference. I guess from for me, I like having a speaker push air. That's kind of how I would much prefer to have my guitar sound recorded. In the I'd say in the early 2000s, I did some sessions for a songwriting group based in Sacramento, and I would have to record direct. So at the time I had things like cab simulators, and I had amps that gave you the opportunity to direct out because they wanted something clean that they could manipulate later. And given for that style of music, I totally understand. But I think a lot of the customers that I have still like the idea of plugging in, turning it up balls loud, and hitting a chord. And there's just something about doing that and feeling the air on you, even at bedroom volume. It's still very satisfying.
Yeah.
But even though I do analog stuff, there are still designers that do work with chips and still work with programming that are doing fantastic stuff. And it might be it might be the next evolution in terms of the DIY. In which case I'll probably have to get a little bit smarter. But right now I'm really enjoying just some transistors and a loud guitar signal.
Well, and there's just something always sexy about pedals. There's always going to be a component of the guitar community out there that's going to go, yeah, I need to click on this colorful looking weirdo thing and, just have a blast on it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, lately I've been very fortunate that there are people who are now open to having jam sessions and things like that, and I'm finding myself now, back in my 20s, I can say that now. Back in my 20s, I used to run anywhere from 30, and I do mean this, 30 to 40 pedals at a time on stage, And and now the last, I think the last 3 or 4 times I've actually jammed with people, I have brought a boost, or I have brought an overdrive, or a touch sensitive fuzz, so like either a tone bender or a fuzz face, and I basically just use that. And it's and as much as I don't have those sounds that I like, it's very freeing, and it's very interesting how how that really evolves in terms of your relationship to gear and how everything plays into that.
True. And I think that sometimes maybe taking 1 or 2 pedals with you, it really does throw it kind of on yourself as a player to what's my dynamics going to be? What's my attack going to be? How do I make this sound weirder? Is the pedal going to give me more or less gronk wherever I turn the knob? You get more focused on that. I have no idea how you even became a traffic cop to 40 pedals when you were doing that.
Oh, I what I would like to do is I can see if some of my family has pictures, because a lot of these pictures they were taken before digital cameras were popular. I'm not trying to say I'm that old, but it was I was still using brick phones. I was still using the old Nokia brick up until I think 2012 or 2013. So it's like a lot of people, it was more like disposable cameras, or it was an actual dedicated digital camera. So a lot of that stuff isn't readily available. But I would definitely love to to show you some of my setups, because I know my family took a lot of pictures of that stuff, where I would have anywhere from 20 to 30 pedals on the ground using a PT Pro. And then I would use a PT2 or a PT3, and I would have it mounted alongside me on like a guitar amp stand. So so it was a very Wilco Nels Klein kind of thing, where where it's like I had a pedal that engaged everything mounted to the side of me, and I would manipulate with my fingers, and my hands and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I would ask, did you really use all that stuff? But I got in trouble once. I forget who I was talking to, some guitarist in a famous band whose my brain can't seem to remember. But he had like 4 fuzz pedals, and I kind of went, really? You need 4 pedals? And he was like, dude, they all sound different, And of course you go, oh, duh, yeah, of course, you use them for different songs, different sounds for different parts of songs or whatever.
Yeah, it kind of got to the point where I got tired of doing all of that tap dancing, because I was the singer in the band as well as the guitar player. But did I use all those pedals? At some point in the set, yes. It might not have been something substantial, but when I'm 25 or 26 and I've got all the strength and all the energy in the world, sure, I have time. I have time to to make 2 or 3 chips if it means I get to bring all of my pedals to the show.
Yeah, I don't know if I was ever that guy, Kevin. Better man than me. But the interesting thing, we're getting kind of close to the hour here, but what Matt and I, when we started this podcast, it was all about how is COVID affecting the industry. And there were, a lot of ups and downs on that for, episodes where people were optimistic or clueless, or when we had Steve Vai on, he just says, no, this is awesome. Just, get writing. It's just how you interpret stuff. But it's great that you're able to, channel yourself into a business, during this thing, because, like you said, you started in October, and then the light switch went off for most of us. Were there any challenges in getting the company started, or did you find that the digital tools available to you, Facebook, et cetera, were enough to get you going?
Actually, I don't necessarily do Facebook as much anymore. I do Instagram. And I found that Instagram has been very useful, primarily because it's instant. As much as I hate to say it, but it's instant gratification. You like a photo and you move on. and the more likes you get, the more you get. It's basically just playing the algorithm. And from there, it's been a lot easier to, let's say, kind of connect with someone who paints enclosures or someone else who's been doing pedals a little bit longer. It's just all about building each other up. And I feel that it's much easier to do on a platform like, let's say, Instagram, where it's quick and I can actually pick and choose who I follow.
Oh, okay. And go ahead. Sorry.
And with regards to challenges, I'm not sure how you two are, but I thrive off of human interaction when it comes to writing music. I have maybe 2 or 3 albums that where I played all of the instruments, and I have a couple noise albums, but when it comes to actually enjoying playing music, I much prefer being in a room with people, vibing off of them and feeding off of them than I do sitting at home and just playing by myself.
Yeah, it's a tough time. I mean, I was lucky because we did the Surf Monster record, and because it's instrumental music, we could mask up and it was fairly safe. Matt is doing his first album now, and he has had to kind of depend on people sending him tracks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Although I guess you sat in the studio with your producer Will Kennedy recently, right, Matt? You're muted.
Oh wait, sorry. What was the question again?
Well, Kevin's just saying that he thrives off interpersonal connections during music. I just said I've been lucky because I actually could have that because there was no singing in Surf Monster. And you've had to, your record that you're working on, you've had to kind of do trading tracks back and forth. But recently you have been able to kind of get out into the studio.
Oh yeah. Well, LA opened up a couple times. I think it opened up twice during COVID, where it was legal to do that, and you're supposed to socially distance and cover your, have a mask on and stuff like that. So we did get a little bit of time in the studio, which was nice. But again, it's the new world is like exchanging ideas over the internet, and it's not as good as having other musicians to play with and collaborate with, for sure. I certainly am looking forward to doing that a lot once everything opens back up.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird because my business has kind of been doing stuff like most. I'm not anything special, but like most people, we're all taking tracks in, and I'm either sending tracks to people or mixing tracks for people. I don't know. It may be that we never we never get back into a studio. It's like, oh, that's okay, dude. I'll just send you a track.
Yeah, if we actually end up, if that's the way collaboration is going to go, then I'm probably going to have to actually start learning how to do some of this stuff, because a lot of my recording is still done with the multi-track recorder that I mix on a computer later. So I'm not necessarily the most adept to recording on a computer yet.
Well, that's a whole nother topic, but
yeah, of course.
But the thing is that with so many people self-releasing now, so many different sonic signatures out there, from super thin rock because they didn't know what they were doing or that's what they were going after, to like full cowabunga, almost HD creations from people. So it's almost like anything goes these days. If the song is good, it's kind of like you'll find an audience. Whatever a good song is these days.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, looks like we're close to being out of time today, but Kevin, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experiences in the guitar pedal building community, and we love Tulpa FX. I'm gonna start ordering some pedals here soon from you, because I love pedal boards also.
I have a suggestion for you.
Hey, does that thing make noise when you don't want it to? Like the dog?
No, he's making fun of my dogs who have interrupted their share of Kingdom of Rock podcasts.
Actually, Steve Vai, when we had Vi on,
I click the switch. So I wish I had a switch on the dogs.
that's what Bluetooth, man. Just make it Bluetooth. All right. Well, Kevin, I want to give everybody a quick round around the horn, last remarks. So, Kevin, do you have any last remarks?
Yeah. Just keep creating. I had to find a way to create because I'm not someone who really enjoys creating by myself. So I managed to channel it another way, and I just think that's probably best for everyone right now, because it gives you a way to still express yourself even if you can't in your traditional way. So it's like everyone keep going, everyone keep creating, keep writing, and once we're this, let's take it from it.
Did we lose you there, Kevin, toward the end?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe just give us the last sentence over.
Yeah, I would say, once we're past everything, let's remember what it was like to be without, and let's get back to supporting each other and lifting each other up, and and not take everything that we used to have for granted.
Yeah, amen to that.
All right, Mike, closing remarks.
Well, I've kind of been blathering too much, and I want to give a shout out. Which way are you? Oh, you're that way. Just want to give a shout out to Matt, because he is not in the area yet. He still managed to show up and help us here. So thanks, Matt, for making the effort. It's always good to see you.
I gotta have my mic time in every week, man. Not like we don't see each other every day or anything. Oh wait, no, we do.
No, we don't. Well, Matt,
all right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for coming. And next week, do we have a guest for next week?
It's a Greg Hoy, who's a guitar player and a songwriter. Pretty accomplished, actually, but we'll kind of get into, we haven't really figured out what we're going to ask him yet, but he's, he's quite, he's a lot of fun. He'll be a great interview.
All right. Well, I can't wait. Well, thanks everybody. Kingdom of Rock out.
Thank you.
Matt Gibson out from Vegas, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.